Scott Tucker and Amy Jacobson. Heard Sunday mornings from 7 to 9 a.m. Learn more at retirementdecoded.com.
Now, from the Signature Bank Studios. Only the biggest stories, only the biggest guests, and only the biggest opinions. This is AM 560, The Answer.
Top of the morning, Dan Proft here. So President Trump spent a lot of time talking about Chinese Communist Party efforts to interfere with the 2020 election. His good buddy Xi, that he has such a great relationship with. This is in pertinent part what Trump had to say, and documents released to this effect to buttress these claims somewhat on Chinese Communist Party election sabotage operations.
The cover-up of this colossal security breach is even more disturbing in light of the additional information showing that China engaged in other election-related activities to undermine my first administration and our 2020 campaign. They did not want, and they just didn't want it. They fought like hell not to have it, Donald Trump, to win, and for good reason. As the documents we are releasing show, CIA reporting explicitly stated, and I quote, in mid-2018, the Chinese Communist Party's policy was to leverage all domestic and foreign elements that were opposed to the U.S. president in an effort to reduce the U.S. president's votes and make him resign or prevent his reelection. Isn't that nice? Also,
he also talked about the raw intel from the FBI that was more specific in terms of Chinese communist aims, manufacturing ballots.
These are exact quotes from the CIA reporting. The name of the person doing the quote is now under review, but it gets even worse. Raw intelligence obtained by the FBI in 2020, yet buried by rogue bureaucrats, stated that China's activities even included an attempt to manufacture illegal ballots for Joe Biden. Documents show that during this period, dozens of significant CIA and NSA reports about China's election targeting were kept out of the presidential briefing. These were briefings I would get almost every day. Everything was kept out that was of importance. One email among intelligence analysts admitted that they had, quote, deliberately massaged the presidential daily briefing to withhold information regarding Chinese activities related to the election. Another official inside the FBI wrote that she was running, quote, a shadow government, unquote, to keep intelligence about China's election meddling from becoming known and to keep it away from the honorable press. Other officials who witnessed such efforts perceived the motivations to be blatantly political.
The FBI agent he's talking about is former Deputy Assistant Director for Counterintelligence, Nikki Flores, who we'll address in a second with our next guest. I think there's a missed opportunity in that speech for Trump. There's a couple. I think our next guest has one of them. The other one I would suggest is with respect to the Hunter Biden laptop and the 51 who said it was a Russian disinformation campaign. I mean, had all the earmarks of a Russian disinformation campaign. I want to get to that as well. But this, of course, was all the predicate to say Congress needs to pass the Save America Act. And on that score, here's the latest, greatest effort instigated by the House, trying to get the Senate to go along kicking and screaming. House Budget Committee Chairman Jody Arrington on passing the Save America Act as part of a reconciliation bill and hoping that J.D. Vance is there to cast the tie-breaking vote as needed.
Well, you'll have the presiding officer as our vice president, so I believe you will. Even if you lost a couple of Republicans, I can't imagine why anybody would oppose an 80-20 issue and basic safeguards like voter ID. But even if we lost 2 or 3 Republicans, with the vice president in the chair, we can do it. Also, They may have voted, the Republicans in the Senate who opposed it may have opposed it on procedural grounds because they didn't want to nuke the filibuster. You don't have to do that in reconciliation. We just have to make a material budget impact argument to the parliamentarian who advises the presiding officer. So there's a path to succeed here and not undermine what some Republicans would think is a procedural principle on the filibuster.
Ian Williams is a former foreign correspondent for the BBC, Channel 4 News, and NBC, author of Vampire State, The Rise and Fall of the Chinese Economy. Ian, thanks for joining us again.
Good morning, Dan. A pleasure as always.
So you write about what we all heard Trump reference last week in terms of Chinese communist skullduggery. But that wasn't the real election plot that we should focus on, according to your piece in The Spectator.
No, I think there's a far bigger picture here. I think the question of who the Chinese government wanted to win the 2020 election is more open to interpretation, really. If you looked at the debate that was going on back then in Beijing, I mean, there was some argument for supporting Trump because they thought they could do a deal with him. They thought that was somebody who they could do business with. But I think that the bigger picture is that around that time, China changed the way it did its disinformation. It became far more Russian. And I think it's even more serious than Trump made out, because China has been targeting the democratic system itself. It's been looking to inflame tensions, to aggravate social and racial divisions, to poke at open wounds, if you like. And I think in many ways that's far more dangerous and far more far-reaching than trying to look for whether China was looking to influence individual voting. I mean, I think, yes, it's almost certainly China got its hands on voter records. That's what it does. It goes after these big data sets and looks for different ways of leveraging them. But I think the bigger picture here is that China's influence operations are now among the world's most expansive and effective. And the target is democratic societies, and America in particular, not just who's going to win a particular election.
The campaign was called Dragon Bridge. Can you describe sort of what how this campaign was prosecuted?
Yeah, Dragon Bridge, also known as camouflage. This was something discovered by cybersecurity investigators in 2019. It was the world's biggest disinformation campaign that had yet been discovered, and it involved hundreds of thousands of front organizations, ranging from China's state media, from diplomats, through to vast networks of bots, of robotic networks, pumping out disinformation, amplifying conspiracy theories. It was initially set up just before COVID, and its initial target was COVID, spreading disinformation. You know, you recall when AIDS first emerged, the Soviets had a big campaign to try and paint that as an American conspiracy, as a secret weapon developed by Washington. Well, China did much the same for COVID. And I think at that time, 2018, 2019, Dragon Bridge tended to concentrate on issues which China felt strongly about, defensive, if you like, Hong Kong, Taiwan, Xinjiang province. You saw a lot of data coming out, a lot of evidence of severe repression against the Uyghur population there. And China reacted by putting out videos of happy Uyghurs being grateful for Communist Party benevolence. Absurd. But that was the state of disinformation back then. But I think Dragon Bridge marked a turning point when China began to insert itself in the most contentious debates in the U.S., racial, social, conspiracy theories, in a way of trying to inflame tensions and stir things up. And this has been developing ever since. You recall, Dan, the Hawaii wildfires in 2023, when what turned out to be a whole host of China front organizations was spreading disinformation that this was a weather weapon that had been developed and had escaped from a U.S. lab. So I think this bigger picture, in a sense, is far more serious than who had electoral gain. It's about trying to undermine U.S. democracy and to try and inflame tensions in a way which potentially is very, very damaging.
Well, there's these clandestine efforts from foreign actors, and then there's fifth column actors like Nikki Flores, I mentioned. Catherine Herridge, great investigative journalist, confirms reporting that Ron Johnson confirmed Nikki Flores was one of the FBI agents who gave him and Chuck Grassley a defensive briefing about a Russian disinformation campaign targeting the Biden family. Johnson said he believes the FBI's defensive briefing was designed to discourage senators from pursuing the Hunter Biden laptop and to lay the groundwork for the false narrative of October of 2020 that Hunter Biden's laptop was part of a Russian influence operation. And she was the one who, as you heard Trump quote, wrote in a memo, "I'm basically running a shadow government across the FBI at this point." That's a direct quote verbatim. So what about those fifth column actors in the FBI and intel agencies that, and this is where I think maybe Trump could have spent more time and been more specific about this internal threat?
I think certainly he could have done. This exists. There's been the evidence that you've described. And I think that we need to understand what China is doing as very much complementing and inflaming this. It's not doing this in a vacuum. And when you do have domestic actors working alongside, whether consciously or not, it makes it all the more dangerous. And also, Dan, we're seeing with the emergence of AI models, the ability to create more plausible narratives, to create more plausible profiles. So stuff that maybe just a few years ago you'd look at and you think, hey, that's absurd. Now you think, well, is it because things are more cleverly put together? And this is where some of these big data sets come in as well, whether it's voter records, the hacking of the U.S. Office of Personnel Management, Equifax, all these personal, there's all this personal data, and the ability of AI and machine learning to look for patterns in this, to look for targets, whether that be for disinformation or for other purposes. So, we're entering a whole different ball game here, and the sort of tactics that we used to associate with the Soviet Union and then Russia, looking for disruption, for sabotage, to undermine. China is now adopting. It's moving well away from the old defensive disinformation that we used to associate it, and has now embraced these Russian-type tactics.
Well, right, and unfortunately, so are our intel agencies. And I just think this needed equal weight in that speech. I go to what Holman Jenkins wrote in the Wall Street Journal, which I agree with. Get your reaction. He wrote, Mr. Trump's obsession with 2020 election would carry less weight with millions of voters if they saw the media with a tinge of honesty facing up to the one action by any country's intelligence operatives that may actually have changed a presidential outcome. And he's talking about the disinformation campaign surrounding the Hunter Biden laptop, which we actually have some, after election polling that suggests it would have changed the election. So, I mean, it's a circumstantial case, but it's a pretty strong one. And, the irony of all this talk of Russia and China is, Holman Jenkins' point, that's the one action by any country's intelligence operatives that may have changed the outcome of 2020 was our own.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of the issues, I think, which you've pointed at there is this, by over-obsessing with 2020 and the electoral process, you miss this bigger picture, whether it's the issues that you describe with domestic intelligence agencies or the malign programs of Russia and China, because this is very much playing into their tactics, because they're looking at the issues which are of most contention, most controversial at home, and looking for ways that they can leverage those, ways that they can poke at wounds. And it's not all happening in a vacuum. These two things need to be seen together. And when you have too much of a focus on the process of the 2020 election, it can miss these far more dangerous trends that are underway.
Ian Williams, former foreign correspondent for BBC Channel 4 News and NBC, author of Vampire State, The Rise and Fall of the Chinese Economy. Ian, thanks so much, as always. Appreciate it.
A pleasure, Dan.
And Ian joined us on the alphawealthgroup.com answer line.
This is the morning show more Chicago radio listeners are choosing. This is Chicago's Morning Answer on AM 560. The Answer.
You need a construction company, but who?
Call Crosscom.
A construction company you can trust that shares your Christian and conservative values. For decades, Crosscom has been doing work in Chicagoland, Northwest Indiana, and Wisconsin. Roofs, siding, windows, doors, gutters, basically everything for your home or business, even solar. Quality work and professional services that make you feel great about your decision to work with Crosscom.
Call Crosscom.
630-871-5500. Give them a chance to earn your business.